Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight's video has been graciously sponsored by myself. For all of you who don't know, I have a second channel that is dedicated exclusively to the new AR game Harry Potter Wizards Unite, which isn't released yet. Anyway, a ton of info was released about the game, and I created a huge video about it which just launched earlier. Now, even if you're not into it, I would really appreciate if you guys could go over and check out the video. It really would mean a lot to me. I'll just leave it at the end and in the description if you'd like to do so. But anyway, without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I collect Ouija boards. I know how strange this sounds. Most people collect stamps, coins, vinyl posters and the like. I should probably preface this by saying I have pretty extensive knowledge of the paranormal. I have been having experiences with it since I was a child. This led me to delve into the world of paranormal investigation in my teen and early 20s. Which coincided with my beginning to collect the boards. Since then, I have amassed quite a collection, but there is one that I refuse to even keep in my house. I call it the Asylum board. I used to do special effects makeup for films, and I was in Salem, MA for a job. As you have probably gathered, I am a lover of strange, unusual, and all things creepy, so I was thrilled by this opportunity. I had gotten into town a few days before filming began, so that I could prep, but also so that I could do a little sightseeing. I was wandering through some of the shops, and happened to walk into one that had a pretty large collection of Ouija boards. Some were vintage, some were edged glass, and some were burnt wood. At the back of the shop, there was a locked display case which immediately caught my eye. Alone at the top of the shelf was a board that looked as though it was the cross-section of a tree stump. It had the usual markings of a Ouija board, but they looked to be hand-carved into the wood. It was also covered with runes. I went to the guy behind the counter and asked, "How much is it?" "It's not for sale," he said quietly. "Why not?" He looked back at the cabinet and then back at me. "That board is made from a tree that was used to hang witches during the Salem witch trials." I looked at him skeptically. That was a pretty tall claim. I really did want the board though. It would look great in my collection and be a cool conversation piece. "Are you sure you don't want to sell it?" Once again, he looked between me and the cabinet. 150. Cash. No returns. I handed him the money, and he walked into the cabinet to unlock it. He must have noticed the confusion on my face when he handed me the board. It doesn't come with a planchette. The board was not exactly meant to be used. I wasn't exactly sure how to respond to that, so I just said thanks and left the shop. Fast forward a few months, I'm back home in Seattle, in my one-bedroom apartment where I lived alone. I had put the Salem board in a box in my closet, since I was waiting on a new display case and really didn't have anywhere else to put it. My closet had 2 sliding doors and a shelf on top of the bar where you could hang clothes. The shelf was actually pretty large, so it accommodated the box with room to spare. I had gone to bed that night and fell asleep with the television on. I was awoken around 3 a.m. by the sound of something hitting my closet door. I checked to make sure my ball python, Kronos, was in his cage, since every time he got out, he would try and get into my closet, where the hot water heater was. I saw he was curled up under his log and cautiously opened the closet door to see the box had fallen off the shelf and was now resting against the door. I was puzzled at this, but thought in my sleepiness that I must not have pushed it back far enough. I pushed the box back and went back to sleep. About 30 minutes later, I heard another noise from my closet, but this time it was much louder. When I opened my eyes, I could see that one of my closet doors had been pushed outwards. The box had fallen off the shelf again, but this time had done so with so much force it had wedged between my clothes and the door. At this point I was becoming a bit concerned. Instead of putting the box back on the shelf, I placed it on the floor of my closet and shut the door. When I woke up in the morning, I turned over to grab my phone on the nightstand and saw my closet door wide open. The box had been pushed out into the middle of my room. At this point I became concerned. This was an object with a lot of emotion attached to it, a lot of anger and a lot of pain and suffering. I thought it best to keep it in a box and put the box in my storage unit. A few years go by and my mum keeps bugging me to clean out some of the things from the unit, since she needed some space for her stuff. It was in the middle of summer, and the storage unit was sweltering. I was going through boxes, aimlessly tossing things into piles, when I came across the box. The room was suddenly freezing. I took the lid off and looked down. The Asylum board was sitting on top of several other Ouija boards, which I had acquired over the years. They had all been cracked in half down the middle, all of them, except the Asylum board. I stared into the box, trying to comprehend what I was looking at. These boards looked like someone had broken them over their knee, surely not the result of being dropped or jostled. I removed the board from the box and placed it in a wooden chest that I had acquired from my great-grandmother, who had considered herself to be a witch. It remains in that box to this day. I believe there are forces in this world that we will never understand. I am sure you are wondering why I didn't get rid of the board. In a way, I feel tied to it. It called to me, and I answered. I consider myself its keeper. As long as it's with me, everyone else is safe from whatever or whoever is attached to it. For some reason, my aunt decided to play the Ouija board with me when I was 8. I'm 23 now. I don't know why, other than maybe she didn't believe it would do anything. I remember everything so clearly. I was nervous, and as soon as we put our fingers on the planchette, it made a figure 8 symbol. I've read that isn't good. Something about an evil spirit trying to get through. The spirit said it was a long-dead relative of ours, but I don't know if I believe it in now. We asked questions like how many kids I'm gonna have, or if I'm gonna graduate college, and shortly after that, my aunt's chair breaks and she falls back. I was scared to death. Did we upset the spirit, or whatever we'd summoned? Throughout the years, I've noticed I've had a lot of bad luck. Not just me though, my whole family. I felt like some things changed ever since I messed around with the Ouija board. I used to have bad thoughts and see shadows in the corner of my eyes, and I still do. Maybe I'm just paranoid. I also used to have dreams about demons. I'm just wondering if maybe the Ouija board has anything to do with this. Or maybe I'm just unlucky, because a lot of messed up shit has happened in my life. I was 15 and came home from school. I greeted my 3 dogs like usual and let them outside for a little bit. I decided to play a game for about 30 minutes, and somehow a swarm of killer bees came through. Of the 3, I was only able to save 1. My family wouldn't let me go outside. I had to fight through them. My dogs weren't the only ones attacked by those bees either. I believe a person was also killed. It was a nightmare. Shortly after that, my mum ends up having cancer. Thankfully, the chemo worked, but 1 year later, she goes mental. She thinks I'm the spawn of Satan, and I just feel like I'm the most unlucky person ever, even though I try to be positive. I still see shadows, and I always wake up around 3 a.m. whenever I dream it's a nightmare. It's exhausting to say the least. Life is slowly getting better, and I'm just wondering if this could be the work of a demon or an evil spirit. I live on a mountain and have a pretty big backyard. Beyond that chain link fence is what my neighbor calls the gully. I've looked it up, and it really should be called a ravine, but gully sounds a lot better. It's big, a lot more steep, and kind of sketchy. It's a forest of shrub oak and sagebrush. Most of the kids avoid it, and adults try to keep curious teens away from it. According to legends, some teens died down there about 30 to 40 years back, and a killer was never caught. It's a pretty small town, but no one was convicted, so it faded to a cold case. I thought it was only a myth to keep us out of the gully. It was home to rattlesnakes and foxes, but I always thought that there was something more menacing out there. So 2 months ago, I asked to stay over at a friend's house. I'll call them Alex. They lived really close to the gully, and I planned to sneak out there. Alex agreed and decided to come with me. That Saturday, me and Alex snuck into the gully. Alex brought a flashlight, and I held the bag with our water bottles. It was a warm night. Most of the walk through the gully was boring. We startled a nest of birds, and Alex saw a deer. It was only when we passed an old stream bed that things started to go south. Alex said something like, "I don't feel so well," and then turned and puked into the bushes. I gave them water, asking if they were all right, and they said that they were fine. I started shivering like crazy too, and I almost threw up myself. My legs were shaking, so me and Alex sat down. We sat there for a minute before I felt something hit my back. I still have a bruise. At first I thought it was just a bug that hit me, but then Alex told me to stop poking their back. Then I heard a voice whisper, "I'm still here." Me and Alex screamed. We started running at full speed back to Alex's house. I looked behind us and saw no one. Another pebble hit my calf, and we ran for cover. Alex has asthma, so we stopped running. It was just me, crickets, and Alex gasping. No footsteps, nothing. We were the only 2 people in the gully. So what was throwing rocks at us? Alex finally said that we were ready to go home, and we started walking back to their house. As we were walking, I found 2 large pits in the ground, probably the same size as a mattress, and a little deeper than 3 mattresses as well. Alex felt brave and jumped down into one, and they told me they found a piece of paper with police tape, along with an old rubber sole and a necklace. Probably just litter, but I don't know what to think considering the rumors. That's when it happened. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. My jacket hood was caught on something, and I was dangling feet from the ground. Let me repeat myself. At least 2 feet into the air, I was lifted from the ground and choked. Luckily, Alex yelled at me to raise my arms and slide from my jacket, and we pelted for Alex's house, not stopping for anything. I think the rumor was based a lot more in reality, and they don't want us to see what happens down there. 2 months have gone by, and in that time I've been doing some research. I went back into the newspapers of my town, back to 1982, and found that 3 kids were reported missing. 2 boys and a girl. Timothy, Juliana, and Andres. Doing some cross-checking, I found Juliana and Timothy's gravestones in the cemetery. She was 16. Andres was buried in his hometown, which was a few states over. In the newspapers, I found the address of their families, and I visited Juliana's only sister Marie. After getting to know her, I asked about Juliana. She showed me pictures of her childhood, and then the funeral. It was very hard on this old woman to revisit her younger sister's death, but she told me everything she knew. She, Andres, and Timothy were very close friends in junior high, and stayed friends until the end of their lives. One night, they were at a party and got very drunk. Somehow, the next morning, Juliana was found buried in a shallow grave in the gully, and police combed the whole gully, only finding Andres. He was laying face down in the old riverbed and was dead. The mourning families had Timothy and Juliana's funeral at the same time. In photos of their open coffins, I saw them, and her pale face still haunts my dreams. And Timothy? His coffin was empty. Marie said that she never liked him. He was always so aggressive and a bully. She'd asked Juliana to stop seeing him, but she ignored her. Alex thinks that the ghost of Timothy attacked us. I don't know what to think. I don't know if writing this will change anything, but I still haven't gotten my jacket. What do you think? I thought this would just all blow over, but Alex called me last Friday to meet them at their house. I went right away, and they showed me a Ouija board. Of course, we went into the gully to try and contact Timothy. I don't like Ouija boards, but I set up my phone to record the audio. Good thing I did, because I can't remember what happened from when I touched the planchette to when Alex threw it into the bushes. Since the audio was really hard to understand, I've got the basics of it now. Alex goes, "My name is Alex," and then they spell it out. And I go, "My name is Kay," and spell it out. We are trying to reach Timothy. 40 seconds pass, and I start to feel sick. Then we begin reading off the board. I-M-T-I-M. Oh great, Tim! Don't want to be any trouble, we just want answers. Are you okay with us speaking to you? Y-E-S. We then ask questions, just to further see if we were really talking to Timothy. It seemed to be going well. Tim, what happened in 1982? 90 seconds go by. Nothing. Me and Alex chat a bit about how cold it is, and we want answers. Timothy, what happened in 1982? N-O. Me, laughing. That's not an answer. J-D-I-E-D. 1982. Yes, we know that Juliana died. Who killed her? D-I-E-D-U-D-I-E. To me? What? I don't know. Tim, is anyone else here with us? Like Andres or Juliana? Y-E-S. May we speak to them? No. Why not? They are gone. Alex, angry. Then tell us what happened. Alex told me the planchette shifted to no, but didn't say anything and moved it back to the middle. Tell us what happened or we'll burn this whole forest. Stop, Alex. Burn me, and you'll burn too. Did you kill them? Alex repeated this after a minute passed with nothing. Me and Alex looked down. Y-E-S. After we got this far, Alex threw the planchette away, and I snapped out of whatever trance I was in and took off after Alex. We ran back to their house and drove home in silence. When we got there, they just sat in the driver's seat staring into nothing. My phone stopped recording at this point, so I asked if I should play it back. Alex said no, and then told me that they were never meant to touch any Ouija boards again, not even the one we'd left at the gully. I remember asking what happened, and Alex just yelled, asking if I'd forgotten. Alex has anger issues, so I calmed them down and just said goodnight. They demanded to go in with me to get out of the cold, and I made them a cuppa, and they fell asleep. When I listened to the audio for the first time, I heard whispers in the moments of silence. I didn't want to include them in the transcription, because I felt like they were just the wind. I wasn't even going to mention them until I was listening to them while Alex was asleep. I kid you not, Alex also whispered while they were asleep the letters A, D, I, E, D, U, D, I, E, at the same time that we read them in the video. I flipped out. I was really scared. I grabbed the Bible just in case some ghost tried to spook me then and there, and nothing happened for a long time. I woke up Alex and they spent the night. At this point, I don't know what to do. I swear this isn't all made up, although I wish it were. I pray it's just Alex playing a prank. But how can you make this stuff up? I just want to share a story that happened to me when I was in grade school. I was about 10 when my great-grandma passed away. We were very close to her, since she only lived a few blocks away from where we live. She has been a lover of the paranormal and practiced Wicca when she was younger, along with her younger sisters. So anyway, she's cool and all, and her passing devastated me and my sister. One day, while the adults were busy preparing for her funeral, we decided to visit our great-grandma's house, along with 2 of our cousins, to play and do a little bit of treasure hunting in her basement. Along with her old witchcraft items, we found an old Ouija board, one that is made out of solid wood and has a nice glossy finish. I remember her telling us that it wasn't a game for kids, but since we missed her a lot, we hoped that we could try to talk to her through it, and all of us decided to give it a try. We placed the board on a table, set our hands on the planchette, and started asking questions, unsure if we would get an answer. After 10 minutes or so, when my cousin had given up, and only my sister and I were playing, did the planchette start moving. Instantly, we both knew it wasn't our grandma, because the thing that was talking to us was sinister and said some pretty terrifying things. I'll kill you. Murder. Need blood. Out of fear, my sister and I flipped the board over, like an immediate reaction or something, and tossed the planchette as far across the room as we could. We then scampered back into the living room upstairs, leaving our confused cousins behind. They followed us to the living room after locking the basement. We told them what happened, and after a few attempts to calm us down, my sister and I gave in, that thinking it was all over. We even agreed that we'd sleep there together since our parents were preoccupied anyway. At around 2 or 3 a.m., my cousin, who was sleeping beside me, woke me up to the smell of rotten eggs. The smell was so powerful, I thought it would stick to my clothes. We contemplated what to do first, and after a minute of silence, my sister said, "What the hell? I'll check on it if you boys don't want to," and walked out of the room. She had always been like that, the type who wants to get things over with, so we allowed her to do it. After inspecting some of the areas where the smell might be coming from, she returned, disappointed. The area was clean, as expected. Thinking there nothing more we can do about it, we forced ourselves to go back to sleep. However, not more than 30 minutes later, a loud crash from somewhere in the room, followed by my cousin's high-pitched screaming, was heard. I was the only one next to him, so I immediately sat up in a panic, followed by the other. I saw him on the floor crying, saying that someone or something with cold, bony hands grabbed his foot and dragged him off the bed, probably at the same time we heard the crashing noise. My other cousin rushed to the main switch and flooded the room with light. What we saw shocked us. The Ouija board, along with the planchette, laid there on the hardwood floor, facing the beds we were sleeping on. The loud sound that we heard was probably the sound of wood falling flatly on another wood. The four of us wasted no time and dashed out of the house with the door open. We went to our great-aunt, our great-grandmother's sister, who was living a few houses away. We rammed on the door while screaming and pleading until she opened up. When we explained what happened, her face went pale and ran towards our great-grandmother's house with a few of her stuff without hesitation. Remember that she, along with our great-grandmother and another sister of theirs, used to practice Wicca and some other witchcraft things, so she probably knew what was going on. An hour or so later she returned, and we received a scolding from her, but not after giving us something to eat, like a typical grandma. She said we could get an attachment if we played with that again, and that it could lead to an eventual possession. I don't care if she exaggerated on some parts of it or not, but the terror I felt was legit. We never even looked at a Ouija board again after that. So I dabbled with the board as a kid, and nothing really happened. Then I saw The Exorcist, and decided I should probably stay away from the creepy board. Fast forward to when I was about 16. My brother had some friends over, and they wanted to play with the Ouija board. I wanted no part of it, so I went to bed. They were playing in the hallway outside my bedroom. I fell asleep. Then suddenly I was awake, because my TV turns on by itself. So, as I awake, I turn to look at the TV. Very surprised. Then I turn back to look at my ceiling, and my poster comes off the wall and falls on top of me, like a slow-mo fall. I had it taped to my wall. I guess it decided to stop working at that exact moment after the TV came on by itself. The next day, I told my brother about it, and he said they had the lights turn off, or something like that, while they were playing, and it stopped after that. I thought it was pretty creepy that it affected me, and I wasn't even playing. The other experience I had was in college at my dorm. I got a knock at my dorm door, and it was my buddy, inviting me to come and play with them across the hall. They had a Ouija board, and a bunch of them were going to play it. I told them, no way in hell. I warned them not to do it. But of course, nobody takes that advice. I just decided to go to sleep. That night, I had the most horrible dream of my life. I was at this festival, drinking and having a good time, and I'm wandering to the outskirts of the festival, and I realize I see my grandmother's house right outside the gates. My grandma has been dead for years, but I spent a lot of time there as a child, so I have very fond memories of her and her kitty named Hobbs. So I'm like, sweet, it's grandma's house. I'm gonna have to go and say hi. I go into her house, and it's kind of dark and hard to see anything, but I can make out that she's across the room, and I greet her. Hey grandma, how you doing? I shout to her. She's sitting in the living room with her back to me, and she tells me to come over. So I walk over and sit down on this ottoman that she's sitting on still with her back to me. So we're looking opposite ways and conversing. I'm asking her how she's been as I'm looking around the house. As I'm talking with my back to her, Hobbs the kitty jumps onto my lap, and I start to pet the kitty as I'm looking around the room talking. Then her voice gets raspy, and she says in a dark tone, "I'm so glad I've got you here." And so I finally turn to her, and I'm like, "What do you mean got me in here, Grandma?" And that's when I see her. It's not my grandma. It's this demon-looking ghoulish thing in my grandma's clothes. So I'm like, "Oh my god," and look down on my lap. The kitty isn't a cat at all, but a huge rat. And just as I see the rat on my lap, I start to freak out and wake up in a cold sweat with my heart pounding. It was the most horrible dream I've ever had. I'm convinced now that spirits can get into your dreams. It just seems so weird that I had such a vivid, horrible dream as they were playing with that stupid board across the hall. I just wanted to get that out and see what you lot think. I'm going to take you back to the summer of 2010. This year, I had a rush of getting into the paranormal. The fact that ghosts and demons are real fascinated me, and would make my adrenaline pump when I would encounter such a thing. Well, this particular night, my sister-in-law had asked me if I had ever taken part in a Ouija board, and at the time, I had no clue what that even was. So, obviously I never had. She begins explaining to me what Ouija boards are, how they work and such, and then she asked me if I would like to experience it for myself. Of course, just as though my heart had skipped a beat. So we decided that we would do it, and had to find a place in order to do it. Her parents wouldn't let us do it at their house, as my brother and her were only dating at the time, let alone even around the house. So me and my brother decided screw it. I know Mum and Dad won't let us do it inside, but outside on the porch or in the garage shouldn't be a big deal, right? So we go to my parents' house, and we start setting up shop on the back porch. We got a candle, matches, pen and paper, and grabbed some chairs around a table, and sat ourselves around it. Just as we were starting, my heart started pumping so fast, it was like I was really nervous. Was this really going to work, I wondered? So we all put our hands over the Ouija, and Brittany had one hand over it, and she could write with the other, as she started asking if there are any friendly spirits around us that would like to communicate. The Ouija board moved to no. Then I started freaking out. I'm only barely touching this thing, and I mean my fingers are pretty much hovering over it, with a paper-thin grip away from the planchette, the triangular-shaped piece usually with a small glass circle in the center used to cast over the letters. I asked if anyone was moving it, and they told me to stop messing with them, and I ain't got time for bullshit, and everyone was saying that we're not playing around, and that we want to see this work. Brittany asked Nick to be serious, and to stop playing around. So then Brittany's voice became firm, and she stated that only benevolent entities are welcome here, and any violent entities were not welcome to speak, and they could go ahead and leave, or we would just end the session. So we waited a few minutes, and all placed our hand over the planchette again, and Brittany states again, "Are there any spirits who would like to speak with us tonight?" The planchette slowly moved to yes. So sure, maybe an entity was lying to us, who knows, but we decided to keep going, trying to communicate with the spirit. Brittany asks if there's anyone in particular here that you would like to speak with. The board at this time pretty swiftly moved to yes, and then back to the center. Now usually, you are the ones that would push the planchette back to the center, but this spirit would seem to guide it. The whole time we were communicating with it. Brittany begins to ask who it would like to communicate first, and the board slowly spelt out Ashley's name. Now Ashley, beginning to get nervous, was asking me, why does it want to start with me? She seemed to be getting nervous and stuff, and I would too if it had specifically wanted to communicate with me first. So Brittany tells Ashley to ask it something, that the spirit could be a relative, or possibly a demon with a liking, and ask a question that only you would know the answer to, and not something that would be easy to guess. And Ashley asked what year the spirit had died, and if it had ever lived. I can't remember the year it spelled out, but I do remember her claiming that it was the year her mother had died, and she began getting frantic and sad, but she was interested. So Brittany told her to ask a question that only her mother would know. I can't remember any of these, but Ashley asked personal questions only her mother would know. Not even any of us would have known, and things started to get creepy. So here, Ashley is becoming very emotional, believing that she is really speaking to her mother, and at one point, one of us would take our fingers off to see if it would just go with 3 of us, then 2 of us, and then just Ashley by herself with the planchette, would still slightly move around, with just Ashley hovering 2 fingers above the piece. Whatever it was had a strong connection with her. I remember the spirit spelling out how thankful it was Ashley found my sister-in-law, that her mother had never left her side and was just happy she had a real friend in her life that truly cared for her daughter. After all that happened, and I mean we spent a good amount of time, maybe an hour, maybe even 2, communicating, Ashley felt like she'd asked enough, and asked her mother to stay with us, and asked if there were any other friendly spirits that would like to communicate with us, and if so, would she watch over? Well, the board went to yes and no. We asked what that meant, and it slowly spelled out evil and good, and that they were good, fought, evil. We thanked her mother and the other spirits for protecting us, and asked her if she would communicate with the others. The board went to yes. So we began taking turns, my brother then Cate just asking random questions, my brother being stupid and asking how he would die, and I forget, but I think the board said age, assuming it was saying old age, and just lame stuff. And the girls all gave him shit, because I guess you're not supposed to ask questions like that. There's some things you shouldn't ask, because you shouldn't know, you should just let them be played out. Well, it gets to my turn, and I couldn't really think of much. I knew I was thinking about asking it if I was going to die young, like my brother had, just to piss off the girls. But to be honest, when I was younger, I never thought I was going to make it past 18. I just felt like I was here for a good time, not a long time. Still kind of feels that way, but I obviously made it past 18 actually, although I barely did. Anyway, I asked if my grandfather was okay, and if he made it to heaven. I got a yes, and a proud response. Then I asked if I was going to be a successful football player. That year, I had just received offers to go play for the Miami Hurricanes and Ole Miss, and wanted to know if I could go pro. The board said yes. I got excited and asked it which offer I should take, which one would be the best for me, and it said Miss. I got excited because that was the school that I wanted to go to, but I also felt like maybe these were easy answers. Maybe it can read what I want, and that's how it's answering me. Who knows if we're still communicating with Ashley's mum. So I asked if I would make it to Ole Miss. The board said no. I got hurt. That shit messed me up. I asked why, and it slowly spelled out accident. I said, what accident? Am I going to be hurt? It said yes. Now everyone was getting nervous, but I was getting pissed at Brittany, reminding me that I was asking questions that you shouldn't ask. But I was invested as hell, and I really wanted to know. It slowly spelled out car and death. At this point, Brittany had enough. I was asking questions I shouldn't, and so had my brother. She didn't like the feeling she was receiving anymore from the energy in the room, and she decided to begin ending the session. Well, that's just what she did. Well, now we'll shortly go as to why I tell this story to warn people about Ouija boards. A year and a half later, in 2011, in my junior, I got a job at a pizza place delivering pizzas after football season to help my parents out of paying my own cell bills, gas and such, and helping them out if they needed it. Well, one night, a car that I still to this day can't remember, I only remember what I was told. I got into a really bad accident while at work one night. Apparently, from what eyewitnesses had told police, and what doctors and police had told me the next morning when I finally gained consciousness, at around 7 or 8 a.m., I was coming around the corner on US 1. It's an old highway down here in Florida, with a bit of traffic following me, and on the other end were two cars parked side by side in the median. One of the vehicles, well, the one I hit, was parked in the median, but majority out of the road of the highway. So here comes me and a bunch of traffic with nowhere to go. I slammed into this lady's back end of her Trailblazer at about 75. I don't wear seatbelts, so I bounced the hell around inside, hitting my windshield and blowing out my driver's window with my face, and I hit her so hard that our cars bounced apart and my vehicle almost went off the edge into the water, as a big river was next to the highway. The front end of my vehicle was crushed all the way to the windshield. Nothing left, really. Sorry, I'd like to keep this part short. I got a grade 3 concussion, a contusion on my forehead the size of a cantaloupe, maybe bigger. My meniscus broke, and my leg as well. I stayed in the ICU for 2 weeks. I didn't get to go back to school that year, and was hospital homebound because I was so messed up I could barely walk from torn muscles and fractured in my legs. I was having seizures, and doctors were afraid of me bumping my head, saying I could easily die. So I stayed in a wheelchair for a few months at home. So yeah, I never got to play football again, and I lost my scholarship, and couldn't help but think, for the love of God, did this happen to me because I'd asked the Ouija board about it, and it had said that it would happen? If I never would have asked, would it have happened? Long story short, don't ever mess around with Ouijas. Be very careful for those of you who do. And above all else, wear your goddamn seatbelts, people. An experience with a Ouija board, which despite being very skeptical, I can't fully explain away. Years ago, my best friend, another friend, and 3 girls were at one of the girls' houses for Halloween. We were just going to spend the afternoon and evening chilling and watching horror movies. During the afternoon, the girls whose house it was says that she has a Ouija board and that we should play with it. All 3 girls really excited to do it. My best friend is kind of superstitious and very reluctant. Myself and other friend are kind of skeptical, but indifferent about doing it as it seemed pointless. Even more so when she brought it out, and it was some kind of shitty thing she'd made by herself, with a bit of wood and a marker pen, and one of her daddy's whiskey glasses as a planchette. But we were teen girls, and they inevitably got their way. My superstitious friend still wants no part, but the other 5 of us are starting to play. The grimly predictable happens, and it starts spelling things out like show boobs. Almost as if one of the guys was forcing the glass when we had our fingers on it. Me and the other guy found this hilarious. The girls just got annoyed that we weren't taking it seriously, so we all agreed to do it properly. After a bit of random twitching, it starts going 5, no, 6, yes, repeatedly. We took this to mean it wanted the guy who wasn't joining in to join. Note: everyone said at the time and afterwards that they weren't forcing it now, and the rational part of me assumes that they were, but I'm not sure. After much persuasion, the third guy joins us. Again, there is a period of a few random letters or twitching, but nothing coherent. Then it starts repeating a sequence of 3 letters and some numbers over and over again. Suddenly, the guy that joined jumps back out. Out of instinct, we all do the same. The glass falls over and is all steamed up with a cross scratched on the inside. The girls kind of freak out. I explain the glass obviously steamed up because of how we spent long with 6 sweaty teenage hands on a cold upturned glass. It's called condensation and is far from supernatural. The cross was probably a pre-existing flaw in the glass. Dishwasher's scratch. We didn't notice it before, but it became more apparent when the glass had steamed up. Anyway, Guy 3 is now very quiet, definitely not playing again. So we stick a movie on instead. Shortly after, he goes home, clearly not his usual self. The next day he calls me and asks if I'll go somewhere with him. We get a train a few towns over, and he explains on the way. I knew prior to any of this that his dad had run out on him and his mum when he was a baby, and he had no contact with that side of the family, knowing only who they were from photo albums. On the journey, he fills in the gaps. His surname is obviously his dad's. His parents were married, now divorced, and he never changed it to his mum's. His middle name was a family tradition on his father's side, and he had an uncle who died in a motorcycle crash a few weeks before he was born. He knew nothing but his first name and about the accident. From going through the photos with his mum, "Oh, that's your uncle, whatever. He died before you were born." Anyway, the 3 letters were his uncle's initials. It took a while of him repeating them, but it clicked. Obviously, at some point, the sequence contained 2 of the 3 initials registered. Then it hit him. The third one was his uncle's first name initial. He'd asked his mum about it when he got home, but she had little to add. He didn't really know. And we were now on a train to make our way to the cemetery where his uncle was buried in, so that he could see if he could make any sense of the numbers. His mum knew the cemetery from the funeral, but since the divorce hadn't been there. He had never been there before. Note: at this point, the steam and the cross, the bits everyone else found spookiest, I was sure were as per my explanation, and maintained this stance to this day, despite this next bit. I was now thinking maybe everyone else was in on it. Maybe he'd been more curious about his dad's side of the family now that he was older, and had visited the grave recently, and they had all conspired to try and scare me. One of, if not all of the others, forcing the 5, no, 6, yes bit, and him reluctantly joining. The steam and cross were still per my explanation, and just a fortunate coincidence. And now we're on our way to some pre-planned big reveal at the graveyard, which would, in their plan, scare my pants off. We get to the graveyard, wander around for ages trying to find the grave, and eventually find it, and the mysterious string of numbers that followed the 3 letters were the chapter and verse of 2 biblical inscriptions on 2 stones. I have to admit that were I not already onto their little scheme, that would have been pretty clever. I turned to my friend to high-five him and compliment him on what would have been a very clever ruse had I not figured it out. to see him sitting on the ground staring at the grave, then start sobbing. Literally just sat there with tears streaming down his cheeks. Now this guy can lie, and he can prank, and my rationalization of everything else and anyone claims to be supernatural would make me the gold standard target for a spooky Halloween prank. But one thing he cannot do is act. He was obviously and genuinely upset. I just went and sat by him. We sat there for ages, and just went home in silence. This was in the mid-90s. He's still my best friend. Randomly over the years, I've pestered him to do another Ouija board with me, as I'm curious now, as he's the only one I've ever had anything vaguely resembling a result from. He always declines. He won't talk about what happened, not as in the silence treatment, but simply changes the subject. However, not long after that event, he did start to track down that side of the family. He's reconciled with his father and met his half-brothers, etc. The past summer, my family and friends took a trip to a resort in the mountains. It was me, my parents, younger sister, brother, and 2 of my friends. We rented out a pretty big condo in the resort that had a balcony. One night at around 1 AM, I was hanging out on the balcony with my brother and 2 friends. We were having a highly philosophical conversation and discussing topics such as existentialism. Ghosts were mentioned by my brother Ash, and I agreed that they existed. One of my friends, Chase, said that he was indifferent on the subject, while my other friend, Braden, said that everything paranormal was total bullshit. Immediately, after Braden voiced his opinions, I felt a presence. It's hard to explain exactly what I was experiencing, but it was along the lines of feeling watched from a very close distance, as if something was directly behind me. Goosebumps shot up my entire body, but I didn't say anything. Shortly after Braden said what he said, he was suddenly feeling extremely uncomfortable. I feel like something is here. What the hell, dude? Do you feel that? He exclaimed. Everyone looked around in shock, and we all confirmed the same feeling. I was a little bit freaked out, but I joked and told him that he shouldn't have said that ghosts were bullshit, because he had clearly pissed one off. Apologetically, he kept repeating that he believed. Braden has a strong mental fortitude, and I genuinely couldn't see why he'd keep trying to mess with us, especially due to the serious nature of our entire conversation. While my level of paranoia stayed the same, Braden's condition seemed to worsen. He said that he didn't feel safe out here, and just wanted to go back inside. We all agreed, and right as we're starting to get up, he froze. I think it just communicated with me or something. I'm not shitting you. He started to insist that the time of 2 AM was really important, and he didn't know why. At this point, everyone was pretty spooked and felt threatened, so we went along with it. It was around 1:15 at this point, and we tried to brainstorm what the possible significance might be. After a couple of ideas, my brother suggested that we should try and communicate with a Ouija board. This seemed outlandish. We didn't even have one, but Braden said that he could sense that it was the answer. Granted, this all seemed ridiculous, but what happened from here on out only gets crazier. Chase suggested that we just make one, so we did. We got a piece of paper and a shot glass from the kitchen and constructed our own board. We went on the internet and tried to make it as detailed as possible. We came up with a decent recreation, but was still skeptical on the whole situation. I even suggested that we should knock it off and go to bed. Braden wouldn't let it go though. I figured that at least we could humor him, so we all circled around the board in the bedroom. We allowed all the protocols and procedures from the internet and began. We all swore we wouldn't move, etc. And while I'm aware of the ideomotor effect, the following events were certainly convincing. We asked for the spirit's name, and for the first couple of seconds nothing happened. Then the glass slowly began to move. T, then E, then D, spelling Ted, of course. Everyone looked around in pessimistic disbelief. The leader of the circle asked more questions. The spirit told us it had died from an accident. He asked a few more basic questions before asking, "What happens when we die?" The glass felt like it was moving faster this time, and with more force. It quickly spelled out, "Say goodbye." Our next question being, "Can we say goodbye?" With a response of yes. After these events, we all swore up and down that we weren't moving the glass, and asked all sorts of accusatory questions to each other. I mean, how can a Ouija board have really just worked? It didn't make any sense to us. Then a drawer behind us began to open slowly. Everyone was freaked out. I had slept in this room for 2 nights now, and the drawer never opened on its own once. I walked up to close the drawer, and I felt force against my hand, but managed to close it anyway. "Get the camera now," my brother said, and that's when we captured this video, which you can find in the description. You can see that we quickly try to pan over the whole thing, so you can see that there isn't anything pulling the drawer out like a string. In all honesty, it would be rather pathetic of me to spend my time writing this story and fake a video for Reddit. Take that for what it's worth. I've always been somewhat keen to the supernatural. I definitely opened up a door when I was 18 and used a Ouija board. We were all in the backyard of my friend's house. There were about 5 of us, and one of our friends had the glow-in-the-dark board. I was terrified but intrigued. My mother is extremely religious and had always forbid me to use one. So we sat there for a few minutes asking stupid questions and not really getting any answers. But it was a couple of minutes later when I could feel it. Something was there. My hands started to shake like crazy, and of course my friends started to make fun of me, but they didn't know what was going on. I started to hear deep males breathing in my ear. I tried to tell myself it was my friend Megan who was sitting next to me, but she was not close enough, nor was she breathing that hard. In my head, I just said, "Go away, go away, go away," and eventually it did. I can't explain it to this day. It was weird, because as it was happening, I didn't tell anyone. I was just sitting there silently freaking out. As we were all heading back home, I begged my friend Megan to sleep over, because I knew whatever had breathed into my ear was going to follow me back. I asked Megan if she had heard a male's breathing, and she was like, "No," and basically thought I was making it up. For the next month, I kid you not, my house was haunted. I could not sleep without the lights on and music in my ears. I would hear footsteps every night outside my door and periodically wake up at 3 a.m. After a month passed, my mother sat me down. "Ashley, what the hell's going on?" I did not tell her about using the board because I knew she'd be furious. "Oh, nothing, Mum. Nothing at all." "Ashley, you tell me what's going on. For the last month, I've been hearing footsteps, and last night something scratched my foot." I just looked at her dumbfounded, because I thought this was only affecting me. I basically broke down crying and told her everything. Together we saged the house, said a few prayers, and it's amazing how different the house felt. I felt lighter and pleasant again. Since then, I've been predominantly more aware of ghosts. They usually come to me in my dreams though. If you've ever wondered if Ouija boards work, they do. It might not seem like it's working, but you're literally opening a door, and they won't necessarily make themselves known on the board. And it turns out another guy had killed himself at the house where we used the board. So I'm 17. One of my best friends committed suicide very recently. Times have been really rough. Ever since that day that I heard the news, I've been extremely sad and suicidal myself, and weird things started happening in my house, with objects flying across the room, footsteps, and finding things in strange places. Yesterday, my sister and her friend, 16 years old, wanted to make a Ouija board to just mess around with for fun, and try to talk with whoever was in the house. I was like, what the hell, why not? And I didn't actually believe in this stuff much at all. We made one out of paper. Me, Tilly, and Ebony sat there asking questions. It did nothing. It never worked when Tilly or Ebony were trying to be the medium, so I tried it. I began asking questions, and it started to move, and we began to feel strange sensations in our bodies, and felt a strong force on the planchette. We all looked at each other in confusion as we watched it spell out various words, as we were all sitting there, accusing each other of moving it on purpose. We all got freaked out and moved it to goodbye. I thought if we could make contact that easily, would we be able to contact my dead friend? I began thinking hard about my friend and said that if he was still there, to make himself known. It began to move again at a different speed. With my left hand I wrote down the letters. It spelled out, back to friends. It then slowly spelled out, I love you. And I wrote it on the paper. I was in tears. I felt like he was with me. I asked if he was okay, and the planchette shot up to yes. My friends and I were so shocked and freaked out. It was very emotional. I asked if there was a message for me to pass on to your loved ones. We watched the planchette move all the way back down to the bottom corner of the page where I had written I love you, and it stopped there. He then moved to goodbye. We told my mother in shock of what happened. She didn't believe us, so I said, okay, try it with us. We sat at the table. She tried to be the medium, and it didn't work. I was the medium again. We wanted to talk to my grandma. Mom wanted me to ask if it was her doing things in this house, so I did. I felt the strange sensation again. The planchette moved to yes. I asked why she was here. My name is Bailey, and my nan used to call me Bay as a child. We watched it spell out, and wrote down, help Bay sad. We were so amazed and freaked out. I asked her if she had any advice for me. It started moving. She said, smile, laugh, pray. It'll be okay. Then moved to goodbye. I don't know what to make of this experience. I'm so mind blown. I can't believe that this is possible. It's changed my perspective of life, and I'm never going to forget about it. The end is not really the end. It meant so much to know that my friend is okay and that he still loves me, and that my nan is watching over me. I can honestly say it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I don't think I'm going to mess with Ouija boards again, because what this experience has taught me, it seems that spirits can be easily drawn, and therefore my chance of letting in something evil would be likely quite high. I'm just sharing this story now because I feel like it's too good and too amazing not to share. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. So the reason I did this video is because it was a poll. I put out a quick 20-minute poll, and Ouija boards beat cults by a 3% margin. Quite good. It seems that haunted houses were the least popular. When I say haunted houses, do you think like horror haunted houses, you know, like with actors and stuff, or do you think houses that are haunted? Just curious, because to me it's always just a house that's haunted. Anyway, like I said at the start, I'm trying to promote my other channel and the video that has literally taken me and my wife 3 days of almost non-stop work just to get out. It really has been very challenging. But I hope it's worth it for those of you who will go over and watch it. I'll leave a link at the end in order for you guys to see it. So it should be popping up on screen very soon. But anyway, for now guys, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.